So welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. Nice to see all your faces. I will get started on the meeting. My name is Karen of the family Hannah, and I will be hosting the meeting tonight along with my co-hosts of Esther and Shannon. So thank you. And we have a very special guest on our call tonight. David, if you want to unmute and say hello. David's joining
Hi, I'm
us.
David Gallup.
Hi, and you're
Yeah.
joining us from New York City, is that correct?
Well, I like to say I'm joining you from planet Earth
Oh, I like that.
because as a world citizen, I'm born on planet Earth under the principles of jus soli and jus sanguinis. We're all born of, well, at least as far as we're aware, human parents on planet Earth. So we're all world citizens.
Awesome.
So yes, and I can introduce myself as you actually call upon me further along in the conversation. I can introduce
Okay.
you to my background, etc.
Yeah, thank you. We're just going to go over a few announcements. Esther, do you want to start? You had a workshop on the weekend. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Sure. Thank you, Karen. We had a stand and deliver workshop this weekend past in Vancouver, and it was absolutely lovely. We had a number of people there practicing, enjoying themselves, and being authentic, and it was absolutely wonderful and dynamic and heartwarming. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome. And what else do we have to announce? Of course, we've got our courses. If you want to go to our Academy webpage, then you'll see the courses that we currently have. Maybe you can post that link in the chat, Esther. And David's going to be giving us his presentation tonight, and then we're going to have a Q&A. So if you do have questions that come up, we would ask you to post them in the chat, and we'll see that they get answered. So again, whether that comes up during the talk or after, then please post them in the chat. Shannon and Esther will be reading your questions. So I guess the other announcement is just that our private members do meet every Tuesday evening, and I'm going to put that link into the chat. So if you're interested in joining us tomorrow night, then please do so. Okay, I guess I'm complete there. So get David back on and take it away. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on tonight, Karen. I really appreciate it. You reaching out to talk about the work that we do and how that might integrate with what Life Force Canada is doing, what kind of synergies we can find, perhaps, and of course, to answer anyone's questions about the documents that we issue, the World Passport, two different versions of the World Passport, one that says World Passport in 7 languages, one that says World Government, and then Passport in 7 languages. They're basically the same on the inside. But that's not all we do. Besides providing documentation of global identification and travel, we also have a legal advocacy team that provides free legal backup, especially to refugees and stateless persons, people who are suffering, falling through the cracks in the international system. And we're there to try to catch them and try to help them to let them understand or to comprehend what their rights are, so that once you know what your rights are, you can claim them. Gary Davis, the founder of the organization where I've worked for the past almost 33 years, which is called World Service Authority, also, which is the administrative branch of the World Citizen Government. He would always say, really, this is one of the most important documents that humans have ever drafted, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Uh, and if you don't know it, or if you don't know what your rights are, you can't claim them. So that's, for him, it was knowing what our rights are, knowing who we are, and why. Knowing who we are and what our rights are together is our keys to our success, on hopefully as a community together on planet Earth.
Is it being
Um,
recorded or not?
Isabella, it is being recorded, yes.
Okay.
Do you want to just mute? Thank you.
so in addition to issuing the documents of global identification travel and providing free legal advocacy. We also provide education to especially young people. We have World Citizen Clubs that we're starting on high school and university campuses, first in the United States, but hopefully into Canada and then elsewhere in the world, so that young people can see themselves as peacemakers, as lawmakers, in a sense. Even if you're not in a parliament or Congress, you're still, in a sense, we're all lawmakers. So we want young people, especially starting young, to know these things. And we're also working on other projects and programs that take my time or the organization's time on a day-to-day basis. We're working on a draft statute for a World Court of Human Rights. This court does not yet exist, but we think it should, especially because there's about 60% of the world's population lives in Asia, which does not even have a regional human rights system. I mean, in the Americas, there's the Inter-American Commission and Court of Human Rights, or there's a regional human rights system. In Africa, there's the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the African Court and Commission. In Europe, there's a European Court and Commission, but nothing for Asia. So if somebody, for example, like one of the Rohingya refugees or their family is kicked out of Myanmar and maybe fled to Bangladesh and aren't even getting help or assistance there, and then there'd be almost impossible for them to even try to use the court system probably in Bangladesh. But even if they did, if they got to the Supreme Court of Bangladesh and didn't get their rights respected, there's no place more after that they can go. So this is why we think that for especially gross violations of rights, there should be some kind of world court that people can go outside of the nation state system, which are the biggest violators of our rights is national governments, actually. So these are other projects, things that we're working on. I do have a whole slide presentation, which is like about 45 minutes or so, which I'd rather not do. I think I'd rather just talk with you and answer people's questions rather than show that presentation, just because I think it's probably more interesting for everyone here. And there's so many people that there may be a lot of questions. So what else can I tell you, though? So I'm a human rights lawyer. I came to World Service Authority in 1992 to open up WSA's legal department because at that point, although we've been issuing the World Passport, for example, as well as World ID cards, World Birth cards, World Birth Certificates, World Political Asylum cards, World Marriage Certificates, exit visas, residence permits, etc. For many years, the organization did not have a consistent sort of legal backup for the validity of the documents. So if someone was having trouble using it at an airport or at a consulate or whatever else, although there were letters written to on behalf of individuals, it wasn't in a consistent way. So I started WSA's legal department to provide some consistency to our legal advocacy, to back up the validity of the documents, to back up the validity of the Declaration of Human Rights and the rights that people want or need to claim to effectively have a better life. And then I became president of the organization in 1999. But the organization's been around since, this is our 70th anniversary, since 1954. And a little bit, if you want to hear about it, because I find this fascinating. Let me actually run back, and there's a book I need to run and get. Hold on a second. I want to show it on my shelf in here. Couple books I'll get out. Should have had them ahead of time, sorry. Anyway, so Gary Davis, the founder of the organization, and some of you may have heard of him. He wrote this is his memoir, and you can see I've read it through it a lot, so it's falling apart a little bit, but we have fresh copies at our office. But My Country is the World, which is sort of a play on what Thomas Paine, one of the founders or usurpers, whatever viewpoint you might have of United States. He said that my religion is to do good. I see my fellow, men, I guess he would have said, as citizens, and my country is the world. So that's where the phrase came from. But Gary Davis, he was a bomber pilot in World War II. Prior to that, he had been an actor on Broadway, and you can see a film which I can put in the, where's the chat? Here's the chat. Let's see. I'm going to put the name of recent documentary, which is called The World Is My Country. So we're just switching it around the words from My Country's World to The World Is My Country. Go to theworldismycountry.com. You can find out a lot of more information about Gary Davis. You can watch the documentary or download it through Vimeo. It's a great film about his life. Why would really, he became a famous Broadway actor, decide to give up acting and become sort of a peace activist and justice activist the rest of his life? Well, so just to sort of quickly tell the story, because it is, like I said, so fascinating. He was an actor on Broadway. His brother was, while he was, acting, his brother was already fighting for the U.S. Navy, and his brother's battleship was destroyed, was blown up, and he was killed in Salerno, Italy. And this made Gary very angry that, his big brother, who he looked up to, he was hoping to write plays with and act with and all later on in his life, was killed. And so he just said, well, I'm going to go into the Air Corps, which was the predecessor to the U.S. Air Force, and I'm going to bomb Hitler's war factories. And so he was trained to be a bomber pilot. But once he was up in the airplane above Germany, dropping bombs on Brandenburg, 19,000 feet in the air, he said, said to himself, well, why was my brother killed and the people who killed him not, taken to any kind of court, for an adjudication, and then determined that they had murdered him, and why am I murdering people? And he was, like I said, a comedic actor. He wanted to entertain people. He wanted people to be happy and to make them laugh. So, but that was a far cry from what he was doing, dropping bombs. And when he came back from his various flights and missions, he saw the devastation, and was just it was abhorrent to him, and so his anger turned to shame and guilt. And he had heard about a young man named Noel who had gone to this was after the war, had gone back to Germany to help rebuild the churches that had been destroyed. And he said, well, I like that idea. What could I do? Well, he said, I think I'm going to give up my U.S. citizenship, and because I never want to fight in a war again, he said, and make it a point to try to live my life, not as a national of one nation state, but as a human being. So his father was a wealthy orchestra leader who had played at different presidential inaugurations from I guess Truman all the way to Ford, I think, five or six different presidential inaugurations. Anyway, so his family was wealthy. He was able to take his U.S. passport, fly to Paris, and then he went to the U.S. Embassy in Paris. He tried to hand in his U.S. passport. He recounts this in My Country's World. But the woman at the desk, the consular officer, she said, no, I think you need to think about this. And in the meantime, Gary's father was telexing them saying, no, don't let him do it. He's just shell shocked. His PTSD was what we would call it now from the war. But they said, no, come, why don't you think about it? And so I said, why don't you come back in 3 days? So he came back 3 days later, and the official at the consulate or embassy said, you changed your mind, right, Mr. Davis? And he's like, no, I want to be given the oath of renunciation. And she's like, well, you really need to think about this. This is a really serious matter. And so Gary started getting angry. And he said, look, if you don't give me the oath of renunciation immediately, I'm going to call your superiors in Washington, D.C. and call you out for dereliction of duty, because it is a right, at least in the United States, for individuals to give up their national citizenship. You don't have to have that citizenship. So she shuffled through her desk. She found the oath of renunciation and a Bible. And so Gary, raised his hand, put his other hand on the Bible, and was given the oath of renunciation. And of course, the second he stepped out of the U.S. Embassy, he was overjoyed. He's like, I've gotten rid of those chains that were on me, that the nation state had put on me as a national citizen, to have to kill my fellow human. But also, there was the fact that he was then in France illegally. He had no document. You have to turn in your passport when you give up your citizenship. So this led to the rest of his adult life, because he was 26 years old when he did that, and he died when he was almost 92 years old, just about 10 years ago. And he said the rest of his adult life he was a stateless world citizen. And it's such an interesting story. He did some amazing things, like he interrupted a General Assembly session of the UN from the balcony, yelling, call you out in the name of the people of the world. If you won't create the government that we want, of, by, and for the people of the world, then step aside and we will create it ourselves. He got, support by people like Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, look, Mr. Davis, the UN can't do this. Why don't you go ahead and create yourself this world citizen government that you need to do. So, of course, but as stateless, it was very difficult. He did finally create, like I said, the world passport about 4 or 5 years after that, in 1954. It was 1948 when he had given up his U.S. citizenship. And so, but because he had no documents, every time he traveled anywhere, he would always get stopped or arrested or even put in detention. In fact, he was imprisoned or detained 2 times more than Martin Luther King was for his advocacy. Gary Davis was imprisoned 34 times in his life, actually, either for having no document, or usually what would happen is, sometimes they would say, no, Mr. Davis, we're not going to let you in on your world passport. And then what he would do, which you can't do as easily anymore now, as he was able to do in the 50s, 60s, and even up through the 1990s, and the early 2000s, he would, get a bicycle and ride in, in the middle of the night. And then they'd find him a few days later, and then they would detain him because they were angry at him for having snuck in, basically. When, from his perspective, if you look at Article 13 of the Declaration of Human Rights, it says everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state, and everyone has the right to leave any country, including their own, and to return to their country. So if you put Article 13 1 and 2 together, it basically means that we all have a right to freedom of travel on planet Earth. So when he was going from one place to another, it wasn't like he was going from one, nation state to another. He was just going from one part of planet Earth to another. And no one should really be detained for exercising a fundamental human right such as that, unless, of course, as you mentioned on your website, someone is doing harm. We don't ever want anyone to do harm. We want people to abide by natural law. Do no harm, make sure no harm is done to anyone else, and keep your word. Which is pretty much what Gary Davis did the rest of his adult life as a stateless world citizen. So it's an amazing story. I encourage you all to go online to see theworldismycountry.com. And if you wanted to, I can hook you up with the director and producer of the film, Arthur Kanigis and Melanie Bennett, who over many years filmed Gary talking about at various places around the world, talking about human rights, talking about universal rights. And then, of course, they also filmed him over a couple of years just on stage, in a sense, telling his own story. And then the documentary brings in other people, really some famous people you'll recognize if you see the film, who also supported Gary Davis throughout his life and the work that he did. So it's an amazing story. I really felt honored, privileged to have worked with Gary for almost 25 years until he died at World Service Authority, the World Citizen Government, and was always taking judicious notes, because every time he would say something, I'd be like, oh my God, I need to write that down. Why wasn't I recording this? But he's written 10 books. We have a newsletter called World Citizen News, and we had a printed version of that newsletter for many, many years, for, 30 years. And then because of the cost of printing and just saving trees, we decided to make it completely digital. So for the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years, that's just been a digital newsletter. So we're keeping up the same work that Gary Davis did his entire adult life, and trying to advance this idea that we are one human family. We only have one home, which is our planet. And Gary would always say there's really two most important questions of the 21st century. One, who are you? And two, how do we ensure survival of humanity and the earth? So to the question of who are you, you can't say, in addition to anything else you might see yourself as, whether it's Canadian, Ghanaian, Chinese, whatever, you can't also say I'm a world citizen. That puts, if you can't say that, that's going to be putting our world in danger. And if we can't figure out how to ensure survival of humanity and the earth, then if the earth dies, we die with it. So these, for Gary, were the most important questions that he was always asking. We still, in a sense, are raising awareness about those 2 points still today. So, I guess I could maybe stop there and see if anyone wants to start asking some questions. I'm happy to answer them and in depth.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, it's so exciting that you shared the book with us and how to find the film. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of us doing that research. Were you
Sure.
wanting to give us a walkthrough on the website?
So can you see this screen?
Yes, yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, great. So this is our homepage, and the website used to be worldservice.org. So if you go to worldservice.org, and I can do that actually, worldservice.org, you will see it says, please visit our new website. So this is our old website that was, from like 2007 to till about 2 or 3 years ago. So basically you would want to click here, which would take you to, this is useful because it has some older, historical information. So that's why we still keep it going. But really you want to be on this website. And there's multiple ways that from here that you can get to the application form. I mean, this is the website. You can scroll down and you can see, our blogs. But to find the newsletter, we are working actually to create a website which will hold or house the newsletter, World Citizen News. Because we were working on other sites, websites in between, we haven't put that site up yet, which we have the name for it. It's going to be worldcitizennews.org. But if you go back to our whether it's Instagram feed or Facebook feed, I mean, probably let me go to Facebook, I guess that would be the easiest. And then you can just scroll back. This was just a post from today because today is World Habitat Day. And if you scroll back to here, so if you click on this, you can read about this, World Government Day was September 4th, which is the day that the World Citizen Government was founded. So that entity is 71 years old, so it's about 3 or 4 months older than World Service Authority, which is the administrative branch of that World Citizen Government. So there's a picture of Gary Davis there at our World Citizen Government booth, reading a book about Einstein there. But then this is the newsletter. There was a museum in Germany which has displayed actually a sample of the World Passport and our World Citizen certificate and card, etc. But anyway, so you have, you can find the newsletter, and it's, about 24, 25 pages anyway, at, whether it's going to Facebook or going to clicking on any of these links, X or Instagram will take you also back to the newsletter. And of course, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, you would just, it says join our mailing list. And at any time, of course, if you want to get off of the newsletter, you just need to unsubscribe, or we'll take you off of that. And if you want to know our privacy or policy or terms and conditions, which is true for pretty much everything we do, it's right here at the bottom of the website. But you can just put your name and your email and then press send. We will receive that, and then you will start getting emails from us. Basically, 5 times a year is the newsletter, so it's not a lot of. You won't get much email from us. I mean, really, even for people who have the World Passport, pretty much we never email you other than really just the newsletter, and that's it, unless you've emailed us asking, for asking questions. So really quickly back to applying. You can either click on the word apply here or apply now, or even under the word documents, you can apply online, but that means you do have to have a credit or debit card. You can instead apply by mail, but that means you'll have to print out the application forms, fill them out, and either email them. You could email the forms and your photo, which could just be a selfie that you take with your mobile phone standing in front of a blank wall, preferably a white or off-white colored wall. So you can email the forms if you don't want to do the online application form. Or if you don't have a credit or debit card, you could pay us by PayPal. You could pay us by, well, from Canada, it's a little bit harder because it would have to be a money order that's acceptable by a bank in the United States that is maybe drawn off a U.S. branch in Canada, I guess. So unless you have a bank account or something in the United States, or have a friend who can send the money order for you here in the United States, because it has to be in U.S. dollars drawn off a U.S. account if it's a money order, for example. But of course, if it's credit card, debit card, PayPal, bank wire transfer, pretty much you could be anywhere in the world. So it's really one of these two that you would click on. So let's quickly look at the online application form. It really only takes 3 or 4 minutes to apply. Just an important notice about it. You would click on, say you want the 10-year passport, say you want, I don't know, the world birth certificate, and then. And, depending on how quickly you want it, we do have expedite fees. So say you choose 30 business days. By the way, business days don't include weekends or holidays. So that it's more like 6 weeks. 20 business days is like a month, and 5 to 10 business days, usually 2 weeks. Then you would check which shipping, and if it's going to Canada, though, you would have to choose we do have actually special rates to Canada, which aren't listed here. So you could, for example, I think DHL to Canada, which is a really good service, is probably either 50 or $60. Um, and and that's still cheaper than what we charge for DHL anywhere else. And airmail, even airmail to Canada, so the airmail's only $10. That's not bad. So anyway, you would choose that. Then you would choose, most people who are quote unquote flesh and blood men and women or whatever, who see themselves as outside of the nation state corporation or framework, would probably choose upper or lowercase. Some people even choose all lowercase for their spelling of their names, which is fine. It doesn't matter. So you would put in your first name, your place of birth. So Washington, D.C., whatever. And then, you could pull on here and you pick your date, but I'll just put your gender, your height, which would be, in meters, or you could put it in feet, well, whatever. Eye color, you don't have to do occupation. Then you choose which cover you want. And then, well, it wouldn't be, if I was getting a birth card or birth certificate, it automatically filled that for me, but I would have to put in my father's name and my mother's name. I'd put in my email, so I could put that, or info at worldcitizengov.org. Anyway, it's basically the hardest part of this is actually, making sure that the photo and the scan of either scan of your fingerprint or your ID document that's stored in your phone, stored in your laptop or PC or whatever, is under 1,000 kilobytes. So worst case scenario, if you can't upload or a photo because it's too large, either you can try to shrink it on your phone and email it back to yourself and pull the smaller image, or you can just put in a picture of a flower or whatever, it doesn't matter, and then email us later your photo and either your fingerprint, or what many people do will be take a scan or picture of their state ID, their driver's license, their national passport, their birth certificate, or other valid ID, and upload those to certify it. Then you have to sign the attestation, which basically you're agreeing that that you are fully responsible for the use of the document, that it is your personal property, you own it, that the information you're providing is true and correct. And then we do have to do a data consent. This we added really just a couple of years ago because of the data regulations in Europe, in Western Europe, because they require it, and even in California, maybe even Canada soon, if not already. There's probably a data consent, which basically means don't worry, we don't share information other than with the staff members who help to create your documents. We don't share your information with anybody. So just internally. And the only other thing is, which is mentioned in our privacy policy, is that there's another nonprofit called Action Network, which allows us to provide, to email thousands of people at a time. It's basically a nonprofit that helps nonprofits to send out like our newsletter, for example. And then finally, there's two other examples where we might share your information. One where you've asked us personally to share it with some government official to confirm that you're an authorized holder of this passport, that it's valid and legal, for example. Or finally, if we were under threat of subpoena, which has happened over the years, where some governmental agency says, this person has committed a crime of moral turpitude, they've harmed somebody, or they or they're whatever, they threatened somebody, whatever, and then they'll basically demand that we share information in our files. But I have to say the basic information that we have on anybody is like almost, let me put it this way: you pay $25 online and you probably have more information about somebody than we would have, or that we would keep. And of course, any good private investigator would also be able to get a lot more information about you or on you than we keep. We don't keep documentation like somebody's social security number or something like that. And of course, payment information is also not stored anywhere. So anyway, so you have to sign there, and then you don't have to do any kind of donation if you don't want to. And then you would just type in, like here, the word is glove as like a test word to make sure you're a human being. Then once you do that, which I'm not going to do because I didn't fill it all out, but then you would press next, and it basically takes you we'll have totaled the amount of all the documents and or issuance fees, the shipping fee, and any expedite fee to in one large amount. Then you would then agree to that, and then it would take you off of our website to a secure payment portal, where then you would enter your credit card data. You will then, and as long as you enter your email correctly, both on the form as well as your email with the payment, you will get a copy of your form that you've filled out. We will get a copy of it. You'll also get a copy of like a payment receipt for having sent the fees. So it's really, like I said, I don't know, that took longer probably than it would take for you to actually do it for me to explain it. So anyway, I don't know if there's anything else, let's see, on our website. I mean, other things that might be useful to take a look at is like the recognition. This provides, examples of people having gotten stamps in their world passport, and the fact that there are almost 190 countries now that have placed visa entry and exit stamps. These are just either a few examples or several examples, but not, we have, offline archive, thousands and thousands of copies of stamps from, like I said, from the past 70 years. Other resources you can find more information are FAQs. There's other ways to get involved. If you know students, people of student age in high schools and or college or universities who might want to start a World Citizen Club on their campus, please let me know. But this gives more information about that or other ways to volunteer. Like even here, it talks about how if you have a certain amount of time, like if you had 60 minutes, you could go and watch The World Is My Country. Let me go to their homepage. There's a picture of Gary Davis that I was telling you about in that film. And I don't know, some of you may know who Martin Sheen is. He's a pretty well-known actor. He introduces Gary in the film and speaks about Gary at the end of the film. He's on a TV show on Netflix called I think it's called Grace and Frankie. Anyway, but he's been in like Apocalypse Now. He's been a lot of famous actor. Anyway, those are some things I just wanted to highlight for you to look at on the website. But I'll stop my share now and see if there's some other questions.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful to have that walkthrough. And I know there's going to be lots of interest and probably questions about the passport. I have two questions quickly. One is the word citizen. Citizen means servant and government meaning mind control. So would you speak about why those words were used?
Sure, of course. So let me first talk about citizen. The way that Gary Davis and that we would use citizen is, what does it mean? What does citizenship mean? It means your rights and duties within a particular communal framework, that framework that hopefully you've had a say in, or that you should have a say in at least. So your rights and duties, but not only does it entail rights and duties, it also entails sort of the idea of membership, being a feeling of belonging to a community like this life force. I would call you all life force citizens. Really, you may not like that term, but really in a sense, you all have rights and duties, which you are engaging even now. The fact that you're all being extremely polite and not yelling and talking over each other, that's because you accepted, maybe just implicitly, that this is a Zoom meeting. We'll be respectful, right? But those are rights and duties in this particular framework. So I would all call you citizen in that respect. So it's rights and duties, participation, or I mean membership, like feeling belonging to the group, but then also participation meaning your right and maybe even a duty to vote on issues or to participate in how you will, in a sense, govern your particular community. So citizenship is all four of those together. It's also the idea of, it could be seen as concentric circles. You're a citizen of your family, first of all, because that's your primary, community is your family. Then it's maybe your city or town. It's your region, your hemisphere, planet Earth, the Milky Way galaxy, the universe, and if there is such a thing, the multiverse. We're citizens of all of those at one time. So concentric circles is one way to look at citizenship too. Another way is to think of like a Venn diagram, overlapping circles. Where not only are you or can you be a citizen of your family and city or region and the world, but you can also be a citizen of life force. You can be a citizen of whatever interest group or book club you might be in, because even in a book club, there are sort of rights and duties because there's ways that you interact, hopefully peacefully, right, within that book club. So you're a citizen of all these things all at the same time, and you don't give up one citizenship by claiming a higher one or a different, one on a different level. So that, in my mind, explains how we're using the term citizenship. We don't see it as slave or being enslaved or a serf or something like that. No, we see each individual as a citizen, in a sense at the top, and in a sense government below. That's how we kind of see it. So the top of the pyramid or the pinnacle would be the individual, and the bottom, and below that is the government in a sense, not an inverted where the government's sort of at the top and us individuals that teeny little point at the bottom. No. So in government, well, I mean, Gary Davis would say, and I like to quote him because I think he was sort of my guru, my wisdom giver teacher, that really government is there to help us to do things that we as individuals or even in small groups can't easily do on our own. So, and government acts as an arbiter, hopefully a just and equitable arbiter, but we know as it plays out in the nation state system, frequently not even sometimes in city councils, it doesn't play out equitably or justly, right? But Gary was not afraid of using the word government. Some people are. I mean, I have colleagues, who are working on this idea of a democratic world federal government, but they never call it government. They call it governance, because they know that the word government scares people. Well, it didn't scare Gary because he felt like one of the reasons why the world is in such disarray is because he would say peace is not the absence of war or violence, but peace is the presence of law that we together should be at least make to help govern our lives, in a sense to be sort of self-governing, but then by being self-governing we can govern hopefully together in a way that is not oppressive. So I mean we never want the people to consider this idea of a world citizen government to be anything totalitarian or dictatorial. But I have to say they're already, and you know this, I don't have to tell you this, but in the background, there already is sort of a insidious world government that's functioning, that's run by corporations and run by the military. You might say the military elite or whatever, the military industrial complex, if you want to call it that, who are calling all the shots for everything. So there's already a world government that's in place, but it's one that's not benevolent. It's one that's not by us, the people. And so this is, so I would say, the way Gary is using citizen really means empowerment of our rights, duties, our membership and participation, and government meaning finding a way for us to work together that allows us to resolve conflicts peacefully and to come to a higher level of awareness and ability to do things, whether it's to build a school, to build a road, or whatever it might be, that I wouldn't be able to do on my own unless I had the bulldozer and unless I had the concrete or whatever else I would need to build that road, right? So this is how he saw citizenship and government.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a great answer. I'm going to call on Esther and Shannon now to hopefully you've looked over the questions in the chat, and if you want to read those for David, then that would be great.
We also have three hands raised, but let's start with one in the chat. And if you've answered them already, then just refer to that. So Stan asks, do you do diplomatic passports?
So no, we don't do diplomatic passports. Gary Davis, because he was stateless, he dealt with a lot of quote unquote diplomats and like consular and embassy officials throughout his life. And he felt that his phrase was, diplomats are the worst kind of scoundrels. Because they would pretend to be, on your side, but then they would be stabbing you in the back. So what I can tell you, and I can show you here this is a sample of the World Passport with Gary Davis's picture actually in it, right? But there is two pages, which are for affiliations. So affiliations even says diplomatic corps, etc., where we can, and we do this frequently, we will add a seal, an insignia, even like an apostille or shrunk down on page 6 or 7, or you could add it yourself if you have like a crimping hand seal, like a metal seal. You can put like a gold star on that page and put a seal on it, which confirms your diplomatic status. So if you do have your own diplomatic status that you want to attest to in your passport, we can add it. We do charge a $30 per label or per page fee to add that, and it's usually like a graphic design that you will email us to us as a JPEG image. We'll add that in, and then we'll laminate over it to protect it. Or you could do it on your own if you have your own hand seal. Those two pages 6 and 7, are meant for you to put what you want to put there, including diplomatic status.
Thank you, David. And Nadine asks, how many people have a world passport? How many of you issued?
Yeah. So since 1954, when we started issuing, we've issued, I would say, more than 800,000 world passports, but to people around the world. But we've issued probably at this point more than 5 million different world documents. Well, like I had mentioned earlier, the ID card, the birth certificate, the world citizen card certificate, the exit visa, the residence permit, the world political asylum card. We even have for people in the media, World Media Association press card. So it's been millions of documents to people because not everyone just gets the world passport. They usually get 3, 4, 5 separate documents at a time.
Thank you so much. Matt has his hand up, but he also asked a question here, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, David, but I'll just read it. Has anyone here found out anything about diplomatic passports in Canada or a foreign national passport? Is that something you can comment on, David?
Well, so I know there's a lot of people here south of the border from there who are looking for a non-citizen national passport. And people have told me that they've been able to get it, but never really wrote the book on it. At least as far as I'm aware, no one's ever sent me like all the details about how do you get that non-citizen national passport, because that usually means that you don't have a social security number. Maybe you have a TIN. So it keeps you sort of outside of the system. And I do know that the U.S. State Department does issue non-citizen national passports. Whether the comparable department in Canada does that I'm not sure. And diplomatic passports, I mean, my familiarity with diplomatic passports is that generally it's someone who works in a foreign ministry or some ministry of a national government, or even the UN has sort of diplomatic passports for its UN diplomats. You have to be generally working for a government, whether it's the official, government of Canada, or whether it's an indigenous government or whatever it might be, who would then provide you with that status. I mean, there are people I know over the years, because like I said, I've been working at this organization for so long, who created their own sort of diplomatic status, or even their own governments, micro governments, and claim diplomatic status. And then, of course, it's up to them to be able to prove that status, to any authority who might challenge it. And Gary would always like to say, where does the authority for the world passport come from? It really, there's 3 parties that it comes from. It comes from us, the official, who says this is a valid document, but that's not that important. It's more, the person who gets it issued to them. It becomes your personal property. You own it, unlike a national passport, which is the property of the government, the national government. This one is your property. You own it. So you say this quote unquote represents me, or I present myself with this document. So you would claim it. And then, of course, there's the third party, which is some official or somebody in an office building, because people don't use this just for travel. They oftentimes use it for identification, to enter an office building, to even pick up their prescriptions at a pharmacy, or to get a library card or other things. So it's not just meant for travel. It could also be for identification purposes. So, I'm not an expert, though, in maybe one of your others, people here on the call tonight might know about, getting a diplomatic document or a non-citizen national document from the government of Canada, for example.
Thank you, David. And I think someone put in, Vicky said about Brandon Joe Williams does something, but we'll go to the next question.
Sure.
How many countries honor the world government passport? And the assumption from Mark is that you still need to have visas. Is that correct?
Yeah, that I would highly suggest it. So there have been now, the actual number that we are aware of is 189 countries, almost 190. So it's about 97% of all countries have placed visa, entry, and exit stamps in the world passport since 1954. It's better recognized in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, more so than North America and Western Europe, because those 2 regions are the most restrictive of the world, and generally officials are from those 2 regions, North America and Western Europe, prefer, they only really want people coming who they consider, wealthy, or who are going to spend money, or going to be, tourists. They don't want someone, some poor person coming from some developing country, because they're worried that that person's going to come and stay and take a job, actually. So they're the most restrictive. But all those governments have recognized it. And the only way we know about recognition is really 2 ways. One, an individual who has a world passport will send us through the email or through post copies of the stamps that they have received in their passports. We used to get it a lot by mail. Now, of course, people are just emailing the pictures of the stamps they've gotten. Or when someone returns their passport, there is a page 3 of the passport, where you can renew it one time before you have to get a completely new one. And then we'll look through the passports that people send back to us, and we notice that, this person had 4 or 5 different stamps. How come they never told us? So then we'll make scans of those stamps as recognition. And then the last part of the question was about getting a visa. Yes, I mean, for example, someone who's in, say, Southern California might be able to walk into Mexico with a world passport without having gotten a visa before because they're going by land. It's a much less serious form of travel if they're walking in or biking in or taking a bus in than having to fly in, for example. Or maybe you're already in Mexico and you're going down further south into Guatemala or wherever, Panama or wherever else. And so if you're going by land, having the world passport without a visa it is more likely you could go without getting the visa ahead of time. But if you're planning on flying, whether it's out of Canada or out of the US or wherever else, if you don't have a visa stamped in your world passport, meaning the proof that the particular authorities have already recognized your passport for the place that you're going to be arriving in, then either the airline official could say, sorry, we're not going to accept it because we could be fined thousands of dollars for boarding you on the plane and then you can't get in. We have to send you back. The Transportation Security Administration, at least that's what it's called here, TSA, or Customs and Border Patrol, either of those could prevent you, even if the airline sells you the ticket and says, sure, you can go, they could still say no if they don't see the visa already stamped in your passport. And then finally, upon arrival in the next country, if you don't have the visa stamped in your passport, then they could potentially deport you back. If you don't have it. There was a quick story about that. There was a fellow, he was here in the United States, who I told him all of this, and he's like, well, I'm going to see what I can do. Well, so he was able to go get his airline ticket. Went through TSA, Customs and Border Patrol. He arrived in Dominican Republic. But upon arrival there, they're like, where's your visa? Because he didn't get the visa ahead of time. And he told them, oh, the consulate told me I'm an American. I don't need a visa. And the officials said to him, well, but you're traveling on a world passport. You're not traveling as an American. You're traveling as a human being or whatever. You should have gotten a visa. So, and then he was sent back. So this is why it is really important to get visas. I mean, even getting one stamp on your world passport is good because an official, when they see any one stamp from anywhere, and you don't have to necessarily go to that country if you've gotten the stamp from a consulate, any consulate, they'll see that it's already been recognized. So psychologically, you're going to say, oh, this must be valid because it's already been stamped by another country. So we do encourage people to get stamps prior to travel, of course. And also, Gary Davis would always say, the more tools that you have in your travel toolbox, the better. We tell people, look, if unless you are opposed to it, if you also have a Canadian or other passport, why not carry both? I mean, you could present, Gary Davis couldn't because he had given up his citizenship. All he ever had the rest of his adult life was the world passport. But if you do have that, what some people do is they'll show like their Canadian passport and then they'll show their world passport and then they'll say, can I have a stamp on both and see what the official might do? And oftentimes that is helpful at the beginning when you're first starting to use it.
Thank you, David. So Nadine, I think you've answered all of her questions, but just would we have to give up our Canadian passport?
No.
And you said no.
No, whether you register, you officially claim world citizenship status, whether you get a world passport or just an ID, even if we were just to mail you a copy of the Declaration of Human Rights, no, you do not give up any other allegiance or status or even obligation, actually. When you get the documents issued by our organization, you maintain all of that.
Fabulous. And Mark says, does the passport have the standard passport scan or coding on it?
Yes. So you can see here, it's machine printed and machine readable. So there is the alphanumeric, what's called the MRZ, machine readable zone, which should scan, although I have to say it doesn't always scan. And that's sometimes because the person running it through, it's crooked or they've done it too fast. But really all that MRZ does is, and we could leave it blank if someone wants to, but then that someone may question your passport if that's blank. But all it does is take the information, like this says S. Gareth Davis, which was Gary Davis's actual name, and it just takes that name, it puts it here on the first line, and then the next line is really just the passport number, the issuing authority, which is World Service Authority, the birth date of the document holder, and then I think it's the expiration date, and some what are called check digits, other digits that are that appear on that line. So yes, it does follow what's called the International Civil Aviation Organization standards, and ICAO is actually in Canada. That's in Montreal, I think.
Thank you. Could you ever get in trouble if you were found traveling with two passports?
Well, yes, actually. So let me give you some examples. You could even get in trouble potentially when you're using the world passport, especially if you don't have a visa and you come across an official who's just totally ignorant about your rights or about the validity of the document. And this is why we have a legal advocacy team, although we're not there 24/7. So if you're traveling on a weekend or something, we might not be able to help you. So quick example, there was a woman who was going to Israel for this was many years ago for a church like not exactly a retreat, but like to I don't know, a church educational event or something. And so she had her uh, world passport in her maiden name, her pre-married name, because she had just gotten a divorce, but she had her U.S. passport in her married name. So she was able to fly to Israel. She got there. Even I don't even think she had gotten a visa. She was able to get on a plane. She got there. So they looked at her world passport. Israel's really strict about, who's coming and going because they're always concerned who's is that person a terrorist or something. Anyway, so they said, well, do you have anything else? Because it wouldn't be easy for us necessarily to confirm this. So she brought out her U.S. passport, which had a different name. And they're like, wait a minute, there's two different names. They didn't let her explain, and she's trying to explain. And they're like, well, no, we think you're just trying to scam. This is wrong. You can't have two different names. And they put her on the next plane back. So, that's usually the worst thing that happens. But I mean, there's sometimes people I know, like in certain parts of Germany, believe it or not, there's certain local officials where if you present this, you might get arrested or detained, or at least temporarily detained, while they're questioning you as to how did you get this passport? Why do you have this passport? For example, they see it, sometimes national governments see this as a threat to the nation state, which it's not at all. It's just an alternative to the nation state, but it's not a threat. We don't have bombs. We don't have tanks. We don't have weapons. We're a completely non-violent, peaceful organization that, everything, like I like to say, is, by the power of the pen, not the sword. It's all through peaceful means. So it's kind of ridiculous. So in fact, when a government doesn't recognize it, in a sense, they're recognizing it by their non-recognition because they're concerned that it is valid and they don't want to recognize it, for example. So people have over the years, certainly people have been stopped at frontiers. People have been, temporarily detained. People have had their passports seized. And then we've had to either try to get back, which we're pretty good about getting passports back, actually. Some governments know, like Spain, Germany, France, probably not. U.S. government, though, we've been frequently be able to, when they've taken it, for example, even Canadian government, we've been able to get it back. But sometimes we'll just have to issue replacements. So let me put it this way. When you carry a world passport, to some degree, you become a human rights activist, human rights educator. You have to know your rights. We have something called the 10 Ps of passport usage, and we can send out a long path. In addition to the passport information you receive by DHL or by post or however you get it, we send you a lot of information with it. But we also have a digital passport usage guide, and there's something called the 10 Ps of passport usage, like being peaceful, polite, professional, persuasive, persistent, patient, having proof, and all of these things that you need to prepare ahead of time before you start traveling with the world passport, so you know what your rights are. You can't just expect that you're going to easily, necessarily, like you might with a Canadian passport, just get up and go wherever you want to, because like Canada, for example, has probably with, I don't know, 120, 130 different countries, it has bilateral agreements saying, if you're Canadian, you can come here, at least initially, get the visa or stamp upon arrival, and then, you can't work unless you get plan that ahead of time, but you can at least be a tourist here. That's true, I know, for like the U.S. passport, but that we don't have bilateral like agreements with national governments, although there are 6 countries that have officially recognized the world passport: Burkina Faso, Ecuador, Mauritania, Tanzania, Togo, and Zambia. But even those countries do not always recognize it. I mean, it's always on a case-by-case basis. Even with the Canadian passport, it's really always on a case-by-case basis. At any point, any official, whether they be an embassy or consular official, a border official, an immigration official, or a policing official, an airline or airport official, have arbitrary and subjective and sometimes discriminatory discretion to accept or reject anyone or accept or reject any passport. So no document in the world actually comes with a guarantee. At any point, your rights could be violated. So people should be aware that you should be ready to be that human rights educator and activist when you use this document. And that's not for everybody, and we get that. We tell people this. I mean, even on the attestation that you have to sign, it lets people know that there's no guarantee.
Thank you, David. Maya asks, what's the difference between this world passport and the global citizen process or program currently effective at airports now?
Yeah, so we don't have anything to do with that. I don't know exactly how she's using that, other than to maybe say that sort of the control devices that national governments have implemented at international terminals to fingerprint people or to take pictures of people upon arrival. We have nothing to do with that at all, and I do kind of feel like that's an invasion of privacy. But But so yeah, that's nothing. That's not. I mean, our idea of like I said, world citizenship has nothing to do with the invasion of privacy or anything that happens at airports like that. No.
Thank you. MCM says, what is the need for fingerprints and what types of storage systems are used to share individuals' information and how secure is it?
Sure. So you don't have to send a fingerprint if you don't want to, but you do have to certify the form in one way or another, either getting a notary to notarize the form, which you can't do on the Jot form because the Jot form's all online. If you're going to do the notarization, and you have a friend who's a notary, they can say, yeah, I know Karen, whatever. You'd have to they'd either have to actually know you, or you would still have to show that notary some kind of document, whether it's a Canadian birth certificate or Canadian passport, Canadian driver's license, or whatever it is. You'd have to have shown them that. But then the notarization can be done on the form that you can print out from our website, and then you can either copy it, scan it, email it to us if you don't want to mail it or actually post it. So there's another way to do it by notary, which doesn't require us to have any copy of anything, sort of about you that you might consider as part of your property, like your fingerprint or an ID document or whatever. So notarization is a good way to get around that if you want to. And we like notarization because someone has seen, either knows you or has seen some document that you've shown them. Or once again, you could provide a scan of a document like a national passport, ID card, driver's license, birth certificate, whatever, that will certify your form if you don't want to provide a fingerprint. So we do have in our office for now, although we're changing our database, we have a cordoned off, server basically, or servers that no one has access to because they don't go online ever. And so the only people who have access to information is just our small staff in our office in Washington, D.C. And we take pride in maintaining the confidentiality and privacy of individuals' data. We are probably going to be moving, I have to say, to a cloud-based server because that's actually can probably be even more secure than what we have locked on multiple layers of locking in our office in Washington, D.C. And that would probably be handled by either Microsoft Azure or one of those larger companies, but they won't have access because everything's encrypted. They wouldn't have access to any of that information, and only we would have access to that with multiple, more than two-factor kind of authentication requirements for us to get in. So, like I said, if you look at our privacy policy, really we almost, the only sharing we do is with staff to be able to produce your document and to produce it correctly. So we're not spelling Karen, Karin, but Karen or whatever. So we want to make sure that there's multiple what do you call it, quality control that goes on before the documents go out to make sure you're getting the information. And the only other thing is like to send it, if you've given us your email, we can send you our newsletter or not. You can unsubscribe or not even subscribe. There are some people who actually send with their application form, please do not, send me any information. Of course, then we don't add you to any internal email list that we have or external.
Thank you, David. We have a number of people asking about the pros and cons of using this world passport. What are the benefits? What are the negatives?
Sure. Well, I mean, start with, I guess, the benefits. Well, having a document in addition to, say, a national passport can be useful because if you go to one country, say you've been to Lebanon, but then you want to go to Israel, maybe Israel won't let you in, or you've been to, even in other places where you wouldn't think there's enmity or anger between countries, like maybe if you've been to Nigeria, maybe Ghana won't let you in, for example, right? Even though they're both neighboring countries, they may have some anger, or even just one official might look at the stamp you've gotten in your passport already and not want to let you in. So having multiple documents can be useful. I mean, in this day and age, you never know where a government might shut down the walls or borders or whatever else, and then if you only have a passport from your local or national government, then and nothing else. This is why we say the more tools you have, even if you can get multiple citizenships and not just have a world passport or Canadian passport, but maybe an Irish passport if you have Irish heritage or whatever else, right? If you can do that, why not? You don't want to get caught within those walls if you can, because a country can not only be welcoming, but it could also be imprisonment in a sense within that within that location. So who knows where that could lead. People also like the world passport because it is neutral document. It doesn't represent any one nation. It represents, you might say, humanity. It represents our universal rights. And people who, especially who are working as a journalist or working as a caregiver or like a doctor or nurse or an educator who might be traveling to multiple places around the world. Like I know, I have a U.S. passport as well as a world passport, but I don't necessarily like carrying my U.S. passport in certain parts of the world if I'm traveling because that could get me killed being a quote unquote a U.S. citizen, right? It can be dangerous. So having a world passport is nice to be able to show that. I don't travel hardly at all, but if I did, I like to have both for that purpose. There's many people in the so-called first world, the developed world or whatever, that really like the idea of the world passport. It's in 7 languages, which is nice. Most passports are only in maybe 2 or 3 languages, so it's nice that it's in all these languages. It represents sort of a united humanity or a future sort of maybe utopian in some people's minds, but a future world where we can live together peacefully, and instead of fighting and dying for a country, we can love and live for humanity and the earth. So these are some of the positives, some of the reasons. We actually have a whole flyer, which I could send to one of you, and you could share that with the group later on, which gives both the differences between the national passport and the world passport, and the multiple, like 30 or 40 different reasons why. And I have only given you 5 or 6 reasons why people like to get the world passport, even just to support you might say, the concept or ideology behind it. Now, negatives, of course. The world passport's been issued, like I said, we've issued about a million whatever world passports since, or close to that, since 1954. That's a drop in the bucket when you compare it to, like, I don't know what the number is, but like the U.S. government, I think issues close to, I don't know, between 30 and 50 million U.S. passports a year, and we haven't even issued a million over 70 years, right? So it's not as well known. So this is why I say you become that human rights activist and educator when you carry it. It's not always easy to use, and it may not be for everybody because of that. And so, like, if you're going on a family vacation, maybe you just stick to your national passport and not worry about this. But if you're traveling on your own, like what Gary Davis would say, hey, he'd say to me, David, I can be a renunciate. If I'm going to some conference, I don't have to go. He was married and did have children, but later on in his life, he was divorced and his children were adults. So, he wasn't with anybody. He was basically by himself. So if he couldn't get to a conference or go somewhere, what he would say to the people at the airport, they're like, do you have something else, some other documents? Like, no, this is all I have. You must let me board the plane. And they're like, well, we don't know. And he'd be like, well, I'll stay here as long as you need. There'll be 10 more planes over the next couple of days. I'll sleep on the bench over there, and he would try to wait them out. And oftentimes they would just get sick of him and just let him on the plane. And in the past, because he was a pilot, sometimes he would go, and you can't also really do this anymore, but he would wear his pilot's uniform and go in with the pilots, and they wouldn't think of anything of him otherwise. So anyway, it is an unusual, in a sense, document in a sense in comparison to many national passports, because it hasn't been issued in the kind of quantity that the national passports have been. I mean, maybe that's the biggest concern, is just that your ability to exercise your rights while you're using it. I mean, people would ask Gary, does this work? And he was like, no, it just sits on the table. It doesn't work. You work it. It would be like if you go to a hardware store and you ask the hardware store owner, hey, does that hammer on the shelf work? And the hardware store owner would look at you kind of funny, like, well, if you know how to get a nail and a couple pieces of wood and hold the hammer correctly, yes, it works. So the world passport is a tool just like any other, but you have to kind of understand the framework in which you'll be trying to use that tool, and the difficulties within that framework, the pushback, because we do get pushback. I mean, because what we're trying to do is sort of revolutionary. We're saying that everyone has universal rights. It doesn't matter where you're born on planet Earth. All of your rights should be respected, no matter where you find yourself. And that doesn't sit well with national government leaders who would say, if we don't have a country, then what are we, right? But Gary would say, my country, or the world is my country. So, we are really one human family, whether you see that scientifically, whether you see that in the eyes of God, either way, we are one human family, like it or not. So we should start getting along. Anyway, it is a challenge. It is sort of revolutionary, the world passport in a sense, to the whole nation state system.
Thank you, David. Is this a UN initiative?
No, This has nothing to do with the United Nations, although the Declaration of Human Rights is a UN created document. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, will you stamp my UN mandated passport?" Because it is based upon, well, it's based upon our innate and unalienable rights, our right to identification, our right to freedom of travel. But those rights have been reaffirmed, whether it's in the Declaration, in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, in more than 100 national constitutions which affirm the right to freedom of travel. It's not UN mandated. I mean, it's UN, in a sense, it's mandated by UN's documents or UN treaties, but it's not part of the UN system. In a sense, this world citizen government is sort of working outside of the UN, because, I mean, Gary Davis would say, nations don't unite, only people do. And this is why we're reaching out to people as individuals, as what we would say as world citizens, rather than trying to get recognition by national governments who are always trying to push back and trying to maintain their power regime.
Thank you. Stan, you've had your hand up for a while. Do you have a short question?
Oh, great call, David. You answered, a lot of the questions that I had. Very thorough. Thank you. Universal Declaration you just flashed there. Is that accessible online?
Yes. So let me see if I can. I don't know if I have the link to it, but the best thing to do is to go to wait, hold on, it's not opening for me. ohchr.ch, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's .org. Hold on a second. I think maybe they've switched it to .org. Hold on. Yeah. So it's the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And if you go to if you put in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, let me see because it's not easy to find just on their website. And at work, I have the link to it, but I don't think I have the link to it here on my home computer, which is ridiculous. I really should. So if you look here, I put in OHCHR and then Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So you can put in, any language, like, well, there's so many languages, like Hawaiian, and then Hawaiian language comes up, and then you can click on it, and then you get Hawaiian, and then you can actually see if you press download, you can see the declaration in that language, in multiple languages, I think 500 different languages. So anyway, it's the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is where you want to, so you put OHCHR and then Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and then it'll come up, it should come up in Chrome or Firefox, whatever you're using, the link to their translations, and then you can put in whatever language you want, and you'll find it there. We also do, of course, for anyone who gets a world passport or any WSA document, or even if you're just requesting forms by post, we send copies of the declaration, and if we know what your language is, we'll send it in your particular language if it's other than English.
Yeah, I like the looks of that little.
It's great. It's a pocket size. I can put this in my when I'm wearing a suit, my suit pocket or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on better world passport or over government passport? Like you've got two of them there.
So the difference, the reason why we have two. So this is the world passport is the one we've been issuing since 1954. We haven't really started issuing this one until 2009, and really not dramatically until about 2018 or 19. So this is really new, but the impetus for the world government cover was Gary Davis this was a couple of years before he died. He said, "David, why aren't we issuing a passport with the word government on the cover? It might be better recognized. And I'm a citizen of this world citizen government that I helped found. I should have a passport that says government." So I'm like, sure, why don't we do that? So we started issuing it. And now on our website, you have those two options, the one world passport cover, the world government cover. The inside is exactly the same. Initially, his thought was anyone who had officially claimed world citizenship status and gotten a world citizen card and certificate would get the world government cover. And anyone else would get the world passport cover, because you don't have to, quote unquote, register or get the world citizen card certificate when you just get the world passport. There are a few occasions where we require it with our with the international residence permit, with the world political asylum card, and the world marriage certificate. We do require world citizen registration with those. So there's reasons for those. But anyway, which I don't really want to go into right now. It takes some time. But anyway, so the world government cover, it's just maybe to see whether statistically, if this one is getting better recognized than this one. And we don't have enough anecdotal evidence at this point. It's only been 6 or 7 years of us issuing. We don't issue that many. I mean, probably 1 out of every 6 passports or 7 passports is the one that says world government.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks very much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, David. We'll move on to Brian.
Hello, David. I watched a video of yours before I came on this. You identified yourself as a human rights lawyer,
right?
And you're talking about the right to travel. And one world governance and world citizen. I'm of the thought that requiring a passport to travel is a violation of my rights. I shouldn't
You are
require a
exactly right.
passport to travel at all.
You are exactly right. Gary Davis would say that the world passport is an anti-passport. The point is to get rid of the passports altogether, because if you have a right to freedom of travel, your body is your passport. When you get off a ship or a plane, the people there who might check you in, to make sure you're doing no harm or whatever, uh, they know you're a human. They know you're a world citizen. You're not a grizzly bear trying to harm somebody or whatever. Well, grizzly bears might be nicer than some humans, but anyway, you have innately and inalienably that right to travel. So really, the long-term goal is that if we're living in a
I get
world
it.
where, for me, for example, if I'm, going from Illinois to Indiana, right, two states within the United States, or if I'm going, say, from what is it, Ontario to Manitoba, right, or something, right? I don't need a passport to do that because I'm within a country. But if our country is the world, I should be able to go from Washington, D.C. to Beijing, China, and it's just like another place in the world. I shouldn't need a passport. That doesn't mean I don't need some form of ID, so I'm not like harming, somebody else by having stolen their intellectual property and pretending to be that person or something like that. I still think there would be some need for some form of ID, whatever that is, and we could talk about that and probably argue about that for hours. But I still think there'd need to be something, but not to prevent you from exercising your right to travel. No, just to confirm that you are who you say you are as you're coming in.
And quickly to your world passport, does it expire?
Yes. So you have options of 3, 10, 3, 5, 10, or 15 years. And so most people probably get the 10-year validity world passport because that's pretty standard, most passports. But anyone can get the 3, 5, 10, or 15-year passport. The 15-year passport, which I don't think I have a copy here right now, but it's called a world donor passport. It comes in a special reddish maroon colored cover, but that one only comes in the one that says world passport. And that's for someone who wants to make a large donation to our World Refugee Fund. It's a donation of $500 or more, which then allows us to provide free legal advocacy to refugees and stateless persons, and a small number of documents to refugees. Like there's been a lot of refugees from whether it's Gaza, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Haiti, wherever, you can name some of the Syria, you can name some of the hot points of wars and violence going on in the world. And there's a lot of people in those places where, they don't even have a job anymore, but they desperately need a document either to get out or whatever. So we do issue free documents for free, especially to refugees and refugee camps in particular.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, David. We have another one from the chat before we go to the two other hands that are up.
Mm-hmm.
It's from Lou Jones. I'm in Mexico without a current passport and wondering if this could solve my dilemma. I think her documents were stolen. Would I have to leave and come back? And can I get a visa there without a passport?
Sure. Well, it depends on what they're trying to do, whether they're trying to use it within Mexico locally or whether they're trying to get, say, back to Canada from Mexico. The problem is if they have to take a plane, the likelihood that either the Mexican authorities would let the person out, probably having called ahead and say, hey, Canada, will you let this person in? Or if the person has some other Canadian documentation to confirm their Canadian status, then maybe they can. I mean, I can't speak for the Mexican government. I can't speak for any national government. Of course, we're not those governments. But I can tell you, from similar experiences with other people in sort of similar type situations, it can be a situation where the person might be forced to go to the embassy of the consulate of their birth country, so to speak, and be required to get maybe even a one-time return passport. Sometimes that's what national immigration authorities will force the person to do. But as long as the person, can prove somehow their national citizenship, if they have it, getting that it's more of a pain. It's more just the cost and the time than anything else. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I would rely on the world passport to get the person back home, so to speak, because, that's not something that too many people over the years since I've been there have tried to do. But some people over the years have been effective in doing that.
I think that I think all of the identification was stolen. And so she can't prove who she is and she can't get out of the country.
Okay, well, this might be, once again, this might be better than not having nothing, because they're not going to stamp your hand. So, and I don't know if she's reported to the police authorities and gotten a written report that her documentation was stolen. Having a police report would actually be very helpful. She might even need to hire a local immigration lawyer to help her with this situation. I know a lot of people don't like lawyers, but she's in a situation which is kind of unusual. And but if she went to the consulate of the country where she was born, whether it's Canada or wherever, I would think that there's one of their jobs is really to help people who are in desperate situations, who have who've had all their documents stolen, for example. So they may have other ways to identify her, whether it's contacting a friend or relative if she has a living relative or a friend who can attest to who she is, whatever. So there are other ways that government officials can probably help her beyond just her trying to get the world passport.
Okay, Lou, I think you came back. Lou left the room and now is back. Lou, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question briefly?
I thought that we wanted out of systems. So I thought, why am I trying to enter a new system or enter again? And then I'm going, well, what if something happens and I do have to leave this country? How do you do it? And then I went, oh, world passport. So obviously that's not all I need.
It may not be. Yeah. I mean, I don't want anyone to have a false expectation that this alone will be, the saving grace or the only tool or document that you need, when it very well might not be. I mean, we can never say, and for one particular person, even yours, Lou, your situation, whether you'll be able to successfully exercise your rights when presenting it. You may or you may not be, depending upon, really, oftentimes it comes down to one or two other human beings, whether they're, nice and friendly and going to treat you with, kindness and respect your rights, which unfortunately is not always the case when you're dealing with government officials.
Okay, so it sounds like, because I've been thinking, well, everybody's trying to get out of the systems, but we're still re-entering them. So I thought, what are we doing? But I guess we have to have a passport. It's basically the only way.
National governments have forced us sort of into this situation. I mean, it's sort of surprising because the passport system has not even been around really for even 100 years. I mean, Gary Davis's parents were able to travel throughout Europe before World War II with no passport. I mean, really, it's really a relatively new invention, invention of control.
Right. So, but you said Gary Davis didn't bother to renew his passport, so he was doing it just with the world.
Well, I mean, he was very effective in using his world passport, partly because he was a comedic actor, and it was funny. He would do things like, people would say, this passport isn't valid, and then he would point out this little important notice in the top of the passport, which says, this passport is not valid unless it is signed. And so he would have signed it, and he would say, well, did I sign my passport? And they'd be like, yeah. Well, then he's like, well, then it must be valid. And then it also says this passport is not valid, if there's any contraindications to, listed somewhere else. So we'd ask them to look through the passport and say, well, is there any other, rejection of my passport? And they'd be like, no. Then they're like, well, then you must recognize it. So he would, it's like playing a game, sort of, in a sense. Right. This was all he had. So in a sense, he had to make it work. And he was very successful. He traveled in, 80 or 90 different countries throughout his life.
Wow.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Lou. LJ, do you have a question?
If your Canadian passport has been taken from you,
Mm-hmm.
would you still be able to apply for a world passport?
Sure. Yeah. The restrictions that the nation state put on individuals generally don't apply to us issuing a world passport, but they still may, unfortunately, because of the biometric system that exists at airports and other places, at borders and all, just because of your appearance, potentially could be stopped even carrying a world passport from traveling. For example, someone who might owe child support or taxes or other things could potentially be on a no-fly list, and because of that, even carrying a world passport, they might biometrically be able to determine who you are and prevent you from using it, not from getting it, but from using it. Now, by the way, we do have to vet every applicant, so you should be aware of that. There are various lists. For example, there's especially designated nationals and list of supposedly terrorist traffickers and
Terrorists.
weapons of mass destruction, et cetera, that we do, vet people against that. But it's
So
a
Bill
public
Gates
list.
would not pass.
maybe not. But then also there's certain places in the world, actually, a long time ago, we would say, anyone would say, what's the basic criterion for getting a world passport? We would just say, being a human. But unfortunately now there's certain places that are completely blocked, like Iran, North Korea, Syria, even Cuba still, where we cannot, as an organization, which happens to have its principal office in Washington, D.C., provide a service or documentation to those people in those particular countries. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be from that country. You just have to be in that country, unless we were to get us like what's called a special license to be able to do so, which we actually have on a few occasions gotten a special license to help someone in a desperate situation who was not a terrorist, but they just happened to be in a country that was wholly blocked. But yeah, so what you're saying is it is a concern potentially that even with a world passport, we could still issue it, but whether you'll still be able to effectively use it if
Right.
the
They could still
government is-
block you. Yeah, they could
potentially.
still block you at the border. Yeah, perfect. Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
thank you, Esther. I yield.
Karen, back over to you. I think we've accomplished most of the questions. And there are some other statements and discussions, but I don't think they're necessarily for David. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yes, David, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And we really appreciated all the information that you shared with us. And it was just a delight to get to know you.
I just put in the chat info@worldcitizengov.org, which is our main email. If people want to email us any questions that they didn't get answered or follow-ups, we're happy to reply. We're a little short-staffed this week, and I'm actually out of the office next week. So if you send something in the next couple of days, you may not hear back for about 2 weeks just because of that situation. But otherwise, we do try to get to emails, if not the same day, then by the next day, and reply. So feel free to email us and take a look at our website, worldcitizengov.org, for more information, and definitely encourage you to go to theworldismycountry.com to read and hear and learn, and see the documentary on Gary Davis, the founder of the organization.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you, David, for being with us tonight. And thank you, everyone, for your time and your attention. And we'll see you again next Monday.
My pleasure. Thanks. Nice meeting you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.